So let's talk about January. January was a pretty busy month, but I still managed to read 5 books during that time. I read 1,651 pages, and we're just gonna jump right into it. The first book that I read in January is The Sky is Everywhere by Jan D. Nelson. I ended up giving this book 3 stars, not because I particularly disliked it, but because I didn't think that there was anything nothing surprising, nothing that I hadn't really seen done before, nothing that really kept my attention. I don't know, I just didn't think it was special. I have her other book on her shelf and I haven't picked it up yet. I'm not sure if I'm going to. But this book is about Lenny. Lenny is a girl whose sister Bailey died suddenly, and she is grieving the loss of her sister. She's living with her grandmother. She doesn't have a relationship with her mother. And basically the book is about the summer after that, where she finds herself torn between wanting to get close to Toby, who is her sister's ex-boyfriend who helps her to remember her sister and who she feels may be the only other person who understands the grief she's going through. And then there's also Joe, who is this new boy who moves into town, who is a musician like she is, and Joe helps her to forget, and Joe helps her to feel like she could maybe be happy and move on and continue to, you know, play, I think it was her clarinet, or whatever it was that she enjoyed doing before. And it's basically about her struggle between trying to figure out if it's okay for her to remember or if it's okay for her to forget. The next 2 books, yes, 2 books that I read are Scythe and Thunderhead by Neal Shusterman. We're going to talk about Scythe first. This is what I spent most of that month reading. This book was phenomenal. Thunderhead, also phenomenal. Both of these books I gave 5 stars. They are, I guess the best way to describe it is this kind of sci-fi, kind of futuristic. It's not dystopian, but it has a dystopian feel to it. Basically, we are however many years in the future, and humanity has found a way to get rid of anything that would kill you. We've eradicated disease, we've eradicated poverty. If you get into a car accident, you can be revived at something called a revival center. People just don't die anymore, and they don't need to fear death anymore because technology has made all of these advances. So in order to keep the population under control, there are certain people, these people here, called Scythes, and their entire job is to just glean, aka kill, people to keep the population in check. So the book is about Citra and Rowan, who are 2 young people who end up becoming apprentices to be Scythes, not really through their own choosing. They more or less get picked for this. And this first book is about their journey under the apprenticeship and which one of them is going to end up being a Scythe and which one is not. There's a lot in this book. It's very complicated to talk about. I think the reason that I like it though, hello dog, is because there's a little bit of something for everyone, right? This is a little bit sci-fi. There's a little bit of romance, which I think is not really well done, and I also think is not necessary, so I kind of just like skipped over that part. There's a lot of talk about factions and political power systems. Neal Shusterman has found a way to make a sci-fi YA book and sneak in all of these lessons and posits and questions about morality and about what it means to be human and about what it means to take and give life. And I think that was exquisitely well done. These books are thick. They are each over 400 pages, but I felt like I flew by them. I felt like, the very beginning, maybe the first like 1/5 of the book is a little slow because you're doing some of that world building, but it's not too complicated that you can't pick it up. And then after that, we really do get into a lot of action in the story. So of course, the second that I was done with Scythe, I had to pick up Thunderhead because I intentionally waited until Thunderhead was going to be coming out before I read Scythe because I knew I was just going to want to jump right into them. And then Neal Shusterman threw me a curveball, and there's a 3rd book in the series. I think it's called The Tome. and that's not gonna drop until the end of this year. And so my plan was spoiled anyways, because now I have to wait at least another, well, it was a year and now it's like 6 months before the third book is gonna come out. So okay, but here we are. This book takes place a year after Citra and Rowan would have been introduced into the Scythedom, and it continues a lot of the stories about faction and political power, and basically there's like New Order and Old World Order type Sais who have very different ideas about what it means to glean, to take life away. Very different ideas about whether there should be quotas, about how you should be able to kill someone, if there are certain ways that should be banned, if there are certain ways that are more merciful. And you also get a little bit more information about how each of the Sais choose to kill the people that they are assigned to kill. They all do it in very different ways, and their rationale and justification for how they choose to take life is very interesting, and that's also something that was delved deeper into here, as well as you get a lot of Citra talking about how she chooses to take life and why she chooses to do it in the way that she does. You also get a third perspective in this book. So previously you were getting like Citra and Rowan and Scythe Faraday, who was their mentor, I guess you could say. And now you're also getting another Scythe in here, and you're also getting the perspective of the Thunderhead, right, which you do get introduced a little bit in the first book, but the Thunderhead is like their AI, their artificial intelligence system that basically helps to make sure that everything is running the way it should. You know, their world is so advanced that you can ask the Thunderhead any question. It's kind of like the Cloud, like how we have a Cloud and we have like Siri and stuff like that, except times a million and way more advanced. You can ask the Thunderhead anything and it can give you an answer. It, you know, controls like electricity and waste management and food production. It just does all the things that people don't have to think about and don't want to have to do anymore, and it runs very smoothly and very flawlessly. The only people who can't talk to the Thunderhead are Sais, because there has been a separation. It's kind of reminiscent of like a separation of church and state, a separation of the Scythedom and a separation of the Thunderhead, and which domains they can roll. So the Thunderhead takes care of everything, except it does not make the decisions regarding life and death. That is left to the Scythedom. And there are chapters in here where the Thunderhead gives its musings, and it talks to basically you, the reader, about how it thinks the Scythedom is doing and how it wishes that sometimes it could intervene. And it's very fascinating because as it goes on, it almost seems like the Thunderhead is becoming more human and becoming more empathic in the way that it is providing its journal entries. And then some stuff goes down at the end of this book that I can't tell you about, but if you have read it, you will understand what I'm saying, and you will understand why I'm so in love and why I'm so angry that I have to wait until January for the third book. But if anybody out there has read Scythe and Thunderhead, please let me know what you think. After that, I read Depression and Other Magic Tricks by Sabrina Benaim, I think is how you say it. This is a very thin book. It is a collection of poetry from a girl who's basically talking about her struggles with depression. I actually came across this book on YouTube because I saw that she did like a slam poetry or like a stand-up kind of thing about one of the poems that she has in this book. It's called Explaining My Depression to My Mother, A Conversation, and it's a collection of, you know, different poems that she talks about. They are written, you know, they're not all written in the same style. Some of them I felt like resonated more than others. I tend to give a lot of books like these a pretty high rating just because I think that there's always something that you can connect to in them. I mean, if you, maybe not if you're someone who hasn't struggled with depression, or if you're not someone who know someone who has struggled with depression, maybe you wouldn't get the same thing out of them that I did, but I tend to really like little collections of poetry like this, and I've been trying to make an effort to read more poetry lately as well, because I know it's something that I don't really read a lot, but let me just read to you the one that I really like, and then maybe you can get an idea of what you think about this book. Explaining My Depression to My Mother, A Conversation. Mom, my depression is a shapeshifter. One day it is as small as a firefly in the palm of a bear, the next it's the bear. Those days I play dead until the bear leaves me alone. I call the bad days the dark days. Mom says, try lighting candles. When I see a candle, I see the flesh of a church. The flicker of life sparks a memory younger than noon. I am standing beside her open casket. It is the moment I realize that every person I have ever come to know will someday die. Besides, Mom, I'm not afraid of the dark. Perhaps that's part of the problem. Mom says, I thought the problem was that you couldn't get out of bed. I can't. Anxiety holds me hostage inside of my house, inside of my head. Mom says, where did anxiety come from? Anxiety is the cousin visiting from out of town depression felt obligated to bring to the party. Mom, I am the party, only I am a party that I don't want to be at. Mom says, why don't you try going to actual parties? See your friends. Sure, I make plans, but I don't want to go. I make plans because I know I should want to go. I know at some point I would have wanted to go. It's just not that much fun having fun when you don't want to have fun. Mom, each night insomnia sweeps me up into its arms, dips me in the kitchen by the small glow of stove light. Insomnia has this romantic way of making the moon feel like perfect company. Mom says, try counting sheep. My mind can only count reasons to stay awake. I go for walks, Mom, but my stuttering kneecaps clink like silver spoons held in strong arms with loose wrists. They ring in my ears like clumsy church bells, reminding me that I am sleepwalking on an ocean of happiness that I cannot baptize myself in. Mom says happy is a decision. My happy is a high fever that will break. My happy is as hollow as a pinpricked egg. Mom says I am so good at making something out of nothing, and then flat out asks me if I am afraid of dying. No, I am afraid of living. Mom, I am lonely. I think I learned it when Dad left, how to turn the anger into lonely, the lonely into busy. So when I tell you that I have been super busy lately, I mean I've been falling asleep watching SportsCenter on the couch to avoid confronting the empty side of my bed. My depression always drags me back to my bed until my bones are the forgotten fossils of a skeletal sunken city. My mouth a boneyard of teeth broken from biting down on themselves. The hollow auditorium of my chest swoons with echoes of a heartbeat, but I am a careless tourist here. I will never truly know everywhere I have been. Mom still doesn't understand. And Mom, can't you see that neither do I? I mean, if that doesn't reel you into this book, then this probably is not your type of book, but I thought it was fantastic. The last book that I read in January was Everybody Sees the Ants by A.S. King. I Crawl Through It is probably the other book that you may remember if you've heard of A.S. King. I read that book a couple months ago as well. This is again a magical realism type book. This is about Lucky Linderman. He gets bullied in school and his parents don't think that there's really any problem with it. They kind of try to ignore it and downplay it. And they also talk a lot about his grandfather who was in a war and never came back. He was a missing person, prisoner of war type thing. And so this book talks a lot about Lucky present day and his experiences with bullying, how he goes off with his mom to stay at his aunt and uncle's house to sort of get away from everything that's been happening at school. And he has dreams about his grandfather, and his grandfather is trying to more or less like help him through this tough time that he has going on. A.S. King, I have a hard time explaining how A.S. King writes books, but they're very fascinating, the magical realism thing. So there's some like pictures in this book. You can always tell whenever they're going to like go into a rescue mission in the jungle, because he talks a lot about trying to rescue his grandpa in the jungle, because they have these little sections called like rescue missions and they have the little like target on them. I think what I like about A.S. King is that I have a hard time sometimes when I'm reading it figuring out if something's actually happening in real life or if it's just happening in the main character's head. Not to say that the narrator of A.S. King's books is always unreliable, but it gives me that unreliable narrator type feel, which I just think adds a different dimension to the story. So yeah, I gave this book 4 stars. That's it for January. If you have stuck around this far, I very greatly appreciate it. Please let me know if you have read any of the books that I've talked about and what you thought about them. Thank you. Bye.